Martin, uh, good to see you, though not the ideal circumstances. Spain has gone through a pretty horrific period over the last few weeks and months. But unfortunately, it looks with the pandemic that other parts of the world are about to head there too. The United States almost seems like it's going to go through a roaming series of pandemics or outbreaks across the country. Here in the UK, the trajectory, if you look at the graphs of the number who died relative to the pace of death, is unfortunately really on a path that is as bad as Italy, Spain. It's really right up there. Having been through that, and fingers crossed, there's been a flattening of the curve in Spain, and we hope that lasts. I'd love to hear first some of the lessons that what are the lessons we can learn from that? What is the UK going to expect over the next few weeks? And what can we do about it going forward?
Well, I think the surprise of COVID was not so much the extent of the pandemic in terms of the dead, but the age of the dead.
What are the lessons?
Yeah, we were surprised at finding that the average age of the dead is 80 in Spain and Italy, that 91% of the dead are over 65, and that with it close to 13,000 dead in Spain, there's only 9 dead who are under 30. Okay, so this is an illness that comes just as polio used to viciously attack children, COVID viciously attacks old people, and especially old men, because there's also an incredible gender disparity. Many more men than women, older men. And so if we were looking at this again, it sounds like completely isolating children, as Spain did, and allowing older people to go shopping, walk their dogs, buy even cigarettes, was a mistake. That the focus should have been to protect the people over 65 and not so much the general population, which of course, many of them get COVID, but nowhere near as many as people over 65.
Right.
We should have been stricter with people over 65.
So it's really not an older disease. So really, it's almost like a stratified quarantine that would work, where if you're trying to get to a point where the population has a level of immunity, expose those least at risk first, rather than having the health systems overwhelmed, I guess.
Well, what many times you read in the media is that these cases of these young people who had no pre-existing conditions and died of COVID, like that doctor in China and then others. But those cases are not representative at all of what's happening. Those cases are very rare. So what's happening here with COVID is as if the chance that you have of dying the next 2 years of your life, you have in the next 2 weeks. So let's say you're 30. What are the chances that you die between 30 and 32? Well, very low. And the chances that COVID kills you is very low. But if you're 80, the chances that any normal 80-year-old person dies between 80 and 82 are pretty high. There's something like 15%. And that's the lethality that we see with COVID. So COVID is like pushing 2 years of your life in 2 weeks to see what happens. It's not an illness that seems to take people at any age and kill them, which the normal flu many times does. But many younger people do end up in the hospital. So the idea of flattening the curve made sense. But I think the next steps for Spain and Italy, now that the daily deaths are coming down so quickly and so much, almost 50% in Italy in the last week,
Right.
will be sort of an age segmentation, over 65, under 65. And of course, there's intergenerational cohabitation, and there's going to be issues with that. But I think those are less than trying to lock down the whole population and not achieving any concrete success. We have to focus on those who die.
Right. So in other words, but also stagger it so that you save the health system from being overwhelmed, which is what we're about to see here. I mean, that Spain experienced that in a terrible way. Speak a little bit about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying if it was up to me, and I have been helping the government building sort of the digital strategy in Spain to fight COVID with apps that allow us to handle all the incoming traffic of patients to the health system. So I have been aware of the evolution of COVID in Spain to a great level of detail. And I think if we were doing this again, we would have to focus so much on those who are dying, bring them food to their homes, bring them medicines, bring them whatever they need, but don't let those over 65 lead quasi-normal lives while locking up children, because exactly the opposite needs to be done. So in order to leave this lockdown, I think we're going to have to do something very unusual, which is to stagger. For example, those under 45 are led into society, back to work for maybe a month, and you build immunity in that group, which in any case in Spain, it seems that around 15% of the population is already immunized, already has come into contact with COVID. We'll know soon when the antibody tests arrive next week. So it sounds like you should have a month in which those 45 and under re-enter society, and then you watch that group, and then you give another group, maybe another month, 45 to 65. And then you have to think very carefully what you do with those 65 and over, because like I say, those are 91% of the dead, and they are retired in general. So you have less of an urgency to get them to back into society where they, without a vaccine, without a treatment, may die.
Right. So ironically, what happened was the exact opposite of what should happen, which is we brought all the children home. So they were spending time with their grandparents because their parents were still working. And you brought this commingling of those who have greater immunity with those who have no immunity, those most affected by it.
Exactly. That if the children go to school and lead more normal lives, it is, and the grandparents are isolated and they know they have to be, that seems to be the policy that makes sense after the total lockdown, which was essential because the pandemic was out of control in Spain. It was essential to do a lockdown which people really.
Oh, Martin, we seem to have frozen. Martin has frozen. Let's see if we can get. Here we go. Martin, you're back. So you're talking about the it cut off when you started talking about the lockdown. So
yeah, I was saying that the lockdown was very effective, very efficient, but now we have to
necessary at that point.
Yes, absolutely necessary, because the contagiousness was out of control, and it was a very good strategy because it brought daily deaths, daily hospitalizations, daily intensive care way down. So that is very, and we need at least 2-3 weeks more of total lockdown. But I'm talking about what should happen after daily deaths go down to maybe 200 or 150, which would be those in Spain of a normal flu. So when we get to that level, what do we do next?
Yeah. So right now, there's no clear plan of how they're going to lift off the quarantine, I guess, as there is almost nowhere.
There's no plan. In the meantime, of course, the economy is suffering greatly, and we all need healthy economy to be healthy, meaning the national health system, taxes, and also tremendous unemployment, which leads to mental health issues, suicide. So we have to balance everything, not just COVID. And I think releasing the population by age, I mean, it sounds highly discriminatory. It's probably illegal in many countries. But I think in this case, it was worth it to make an exception. And the other exception that's worth making is to privacy laws, because if we have good apps that geolocalize people, that shows a focus of infection, that divide people into those who have been immunized, who can go anywhere, and those who haven't, and also by age, those who because of their age, let's say being under 30, can also go anywhere, and those who are older, that should be more cautious. I think we're going to have to do a lot of things we've never done before that sound against privacy, sometimes would have been illegal in other circumstances, but now they're necessary to save lives.
Right, which is contrasting. Looking at China, China's been able to enact incredible things where you now walk around and show an app that says you've had coronavirus, or you're COVID, or you are you've tested in a certain way. Your temperature is taken every time you walk into a building with a facial recognition that can recognize who you are, even with a mask. So it seems like there's going to be a lot of changes in society. Are there any others that you've noticed in Spain during the lockdown?
I was going to say that what I admire about Asians in this case is that it's not just the Chinese, it's the democratic Asians, like the Koreans, who have also instituted similar apps, because this is not an ideology issue. I know it sounds like Big Brother is watching you and the Chinese would love a situation like this, but the Koreans are also doing it. The Taiwanese are doing it. The Japanese are doing it. So because Asians wear masks, Asians comply with these apps, and it served them so well. I mean, the pandemic in those countries went like this and then went down.
Yeah.
And we have to achieve, I think we have to emulate them.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. There's an interesting question coming through from Michael Buchol, which is, how do we handle, given the theory of the age stratification, how do we handle the opening of borders to stop it spreading? Do we make that only people of a certain age can travel to and from places? I presume that once this all opens up, you'll have a green armband or something saying that you have had it.
That's a very good question. And I think that the European Union should have common rules about this. I think then the UK will make its own rules. The US will make its own rules. But I think it does make sense that if you're immunized or you're under 40 or 45, you're certainly in a much safer position to travel. If you test positive to antibodies, and I think, that protecting those over 70 until there's a vaccine, a treatment, or until everyone else is immunized to the point where they are unlikely to get these, because 87% of the dead are over 70, and it's just that's what this virus does. It kills older people.
Yeah. And the terrible thing is, the aftermath of this is that loss of knowledge, information, loved ones, of that whole, it's a generation taken before its time.
No, I think that if we have massive testing, and especially random testing, meaning not only test those with symptoms, but random testing, let's say 10,000 people in London or in New York every week randomly, we will also see what happens to every age segment. And we will be able to adjust these to the point where hopefully we'll go back to normal and everyone can lead normal lives. Right now, we're in darkness. We don't have enough tests. I mean, in my companies, we've ordered tests that are arriving this Monday, and we're going to test our 200 employees, family members. We want to do the same in our company in the States. That's That's over 1,000, and we were going to do it, but then the FDA stopped the antibody tests for some not clear to me reason. We have to be able to test. Companies have to be able to test their employees, and people have to be able to test themselves, and national health system test them, so we know what percentage of people are immunized.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you saw the statistics out of Iceland, which is one of the few places where they've done mass testing of an entire population, showing that it has spread much more than we thought it had, giving us insights into, as you said, into what the nature of this disease really is.
Yes, I saw that, and I saw the Imperial College study that estimated that Spain had 7 million people who had already been exposed. I see through our digital apps that number makes sense. We couldn't speak about this, but yesterday the government said this publicly, so now I'm at liberty to speak about this. It is way beyond the 130,000 diagnosed people that appear in Spain. In Spain, we have like 130,000 and around 13,000 deaths. And that sounds like horrifying, like a 10%, you get this thing, 10% chance you die. But when the denominator is 7 million, then it begins looking like a regular flu for everyone except the 65 and over, which is maybe 10 times worse than a regular flu.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, Giovanni Milani was talking about the key thing, which is going forward, is this a one-off thing or not? And I think the way that we respond to this, and to your point, the way that we bring this move out of this quarantine situation is going to be key, and help inform how we can respond to this if it does happen again, which hopefully it won't. But
well, I think it may happen again in other forms, but right now the urgency is to get out of this one. And I think to get out of this one, we have to do it in an organized, safe way where we can save lives and save the economy.
Right. Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Martin.
No, happy to be here. Great to see you.
Stay safe and well.
You too.